mean, you came out of the agency world, did a startup in Australia, ran a couple of successful Australian agencies, moved over, worked with the richest man in the world on a streaming platform, then actually moved on to work for Spotify, and I'm missing a couple in between. Did
Yeah.
I?
So he was, I think he didn't become the wealthiest man in the world. He became the second wealthiest man in the world for a short period of time.
Okay.
And I did work with Spotify, not directly for Spotify, on a couple of occasions. So we built some apps for them back in the day. And then when I was at Amazon with Alexa,
Oh, that's what it was. Yeah, 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 yeah.
I was
Exactly. Sorry
managing the
about.
relationship with Alexa Music and Spotify and iHeartRadio.
Right.
Pretty wild. And we did work with MySpace and
Oh, you're product guy. I think you are. I would consider you. You might not say that, but I think you're product guy.
yeah, that's how I feel at this day and age.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Um, and really, as part of that, really, I think your gig at Magnapus was really about kind of building a product all around VR, AR, and also with all your previous experience. I'd love to see how you think that AR is changing, and how do you, especially now with the defunct value propositions with Meta, like where do you feel this is going? Where do large technology companies see the place of AR VR, especially also announcing, Apple is announcing the headset in a week or so, right? And we know the rumors are what, $3,000 Halo product with an experience in an app store. I mean, maybe we should have this conversation after they came out, but I feel like maybe it's even better before to see what people do, right? So I want to hear your perspective on things.
Yeah, and maybe even we do a follow up after the Apple announcement because I
Right.
think everyone is waiting for Apple to make AR and VR viable. That said, big tech, everyone is in AI, so everything is being swept to the side, and everything is the AI, you know, wall race at the moment. So we are in an arms race in AI, and AR and VR have been pushed to the side. They're not being abandoned, but they're no longer the priority that everyone was attributing to them. The whole game that big tech is playing is ecosystem. So everyone is vying to build and own the ecosystem. You see that with the fight between Apple and Epic because they're both trying to control their own ecosystem. Google is playing a slightly different game. They want to do the same thing they've done with Android, which is let's provide the tools and the platform. And they're doing an amazing job with it. They had announced last week, which is a fantastic toolkit, which lets you use Google Earth and create AR content directly using Google Earth. And that's amazing. So you can create your own content in any location on Earth and others can view it, which is actually what we're building at Magnopus. So it's one of the tools we're building there. So they're pushing out to the side at the moment. In terms of what is holding it back and what everyone is waiting for, it's if you look at all the analysts, this is a technology problem and a material science problem. And so they're saying we're not going to have real spectacles that you can wear that are going to be good looking, lightweight, with high battery life until the end of the decade. And
Right.
until that happens, we're really only going to see niche, high value use cases in all of these areas. So VR is already getting a whole bunch of stuff in terms of simulation, training, architecture, construction, maintenance is a really huge one as well. Then that bleeds over into the AR space. And so there's money being made there, and people are doing great work in that space. Everyone's craving the consumer win case. Snapchat is doing really interesting stuff with AR at the moment. The thing that's holding it all back from the consumer point of view is what is the compelling use case? What is that killer app where I just go, I have to use AR or VR to make it happen? Where's the Instagram? Where's the Shopify for my small business or my personal business? And at the moment, we haven't seen anything come out. And my view on it is one, it's the technology. The technology is irritating to use. I mean, we built the largest connected space in the world at Magnopus, which is 4 square kilometers. You could have an AR experience, but your phone would die in 45 minutes.
Right.
And your arm would get sore in 10 minutes. And
Right.
so until we can get this hardware problem solved, we're going to be very, very limited. The use cases are going to have to be so compelling that people get drawn into it. The other area that's really held it back, and I think this is going to change, is content creation. content creation is super expensive, super difficult, and incompatible. So you build for one platform, you have to then build all your content again for another platform. And so that's been super hard. AI is going to change that. It's already doing it now. You can already build with a prompt 3D assets. They're not great, but give it another 18 months and we're going to be building content, and there's going to be tens of thousands of 3D asset creators out of jobs around the world because the quality is going to be amazing. And that's going to solve the content problem. And so that's going to unleash everything. The third part of it is then having real ecosystems where you can publish. So like the App Store, but for this content and all the toolkit that goes along with it. So that way anyone can come along and build. Or you're sitting inside an ecosystem like Instagram, where if I'm a photographer or I have a lifestyle brand, I can just publish my content without having to build my own app or anything like that. And I'm willing to sacrifice my control of my audience because you give me access and distribution and make it so easy for me to publish. And we don't have anything like that for AR or VR yet. It'll come, and people are trying to do it like Meta Horizons, etc., and eventually Meta Horizons will be great. I hope.
Right. So I think following up with that, do you see that the near-term success of AR and VR is going to be in like very particular vertical applications that are specific versus a more general purpose platform because of that technology limitation?
There's going to be two plays, and AR and VR are very different markets. So it's kind of strange merging the two together. So we're already seeing at the moment VR use cases. There's money being made in there. Yeah, in these vertical industries where there's real compelling use cases, people are building businesses on it, and they're going down that path. And that's like the early days of the internet. There was so much value that even if it was hard to build and expensive to build, it was worthwhile doing it. Medical is a great use case, right, in terms of training people as well as giving toolkits for doctors to be able to operate remotely, as well as to be able to operate at zero risk on virtual patients. That's worth huge amounts of money. And so there's value in doing that. The AR case feels like it's more advertising driven. And so from a consumer point of view, that's where AR is coming in. There's a whole bunch of maintenance use cases in terms of maintaining trucks, mine sites, engineering, buildings, all that sort of stuff. And they're pretty interesting. And that's going to have its own pathway. And there's going to be one or two winners out of that. But that consumer play and that advertising play, that's where Google really lives. And that's where you're going to see this mass adoption. But that's going to be a slow build. Snap is already playing in that space with their filters. And interestingly, few people know it, but Snap has the best Web 3D engine in the world at the moment. And so they're just quietly building that in the background. And with Web GPU, it's going to be feature comparable to some of these, direct desktop type 3D engines. And so that can be deployed anywhere. So that's really, really interesting in terms of liberating us on our phones and our desktops to do other things. But those plays are longer plays.
Mm-hmm.
And makes with sense. The rise of AI, the two are going to mix.
Of course.
It's going to have to happen.
You work at very large organizations and you built your own agencies and worked in, very agile environments. How do you see the approach being different, the strategic approach for product development being different in a large organization versus a small organization?
It's a really good question. It's something that I think about a lot and have thought about a lot for decades, really. The startup environment, you have to take bigger risks. You're betting everything, and you have to move really, really quickly. And the alignment problem is less of an issue. You can generally get the whole team together on a call, and you can talk about what you're doing. And so your problems are very different. Your problems are about speed and about product market fit. Yeah, right. That's all about iterating very, very quickly. And even though large organizations talk about the iteration cycle, and when you're in a startup, you all want the resources of a big company, the reality is these larger organizations are trying to do so much that the initiatives that you end up working on generally don't have that many resources. So the alignment problem becomes really, really hard. And so that becomes, stakeholder management is always challenging. But in a large organization, it is your number one challenge as a product owner. Or product manager. And so going horizontally, going vertically, up and down a chain, that's where most of your energy is spent. And so you have to be so on song with your message and so on song in terms of the value proposition that you're doing. You can't move at the same speed you can when you're in startup. And you can't take the same big bets that are high reward but high risk in these organizations. So the equations shift and the skill set shifts quite dramatically. When you're in a small organization, you're working very, very closely hands-on with engineers. The decisions you're making impact the entire stack, not quite on a daily basis, but regularly. Whereas when you're in a larger organization, you're building with frameworks that are years old, sometimes decades old, as well as the internal processes of how things get done. And so it changes the time horizon of what you can do and the kind of ambition of what you can achieve from a product point of view. So they both have real pros and cons, and they're both really, really challenging, and both really exciting to work with, obviously. Within a big organization, you can make an impact on millions, if not tens of millions of people with a small change in a product. Whereas to get access to 1 million people you start up, that's a Herculean effort to start with. Right. So they're both really exciting environments, and it's hard to pick where you want to live, but they do require different mindsets significantly to be successful. I think there's one little thing that we were talking about tools. And I think it's really important. It's like I'm a tool nut. I spend a lot of time on product hunt. I try tools out all the time. Tools are never the answer. The alignment problem is the biggest problem in product management. Is my view on it. Getting strategy right, aligning what your customers' needs are, understanding who they are, etc., etc. That's important. But getting your teams aligned, getting the individuals aligned, that's the hardest part of it, and that comes down to culture. So how do you set up the mechanisms in place using Amazon nomenclature to make it downhill for people to share rather than uphill?
Right.
And AI is really helping with that. So there's tools out there now that give you a summary of your Zoom meetings and give you a summary of your code base and what's been pushed out, etc., etc. And so it's really changing the game. So people can get up to speed really, really quickly. You don't need all these meetings. But creating that culture is really hard. People have very entrenched ways of doing things, and the world is moving faster than most people are able to change.
That's fascinating.
So how do you support them? As a leader in an organization, when you're trying to make something happen, how can you support people through this change of behavior and support them to be more open, more collaborative, and to move faster with the way in which they do things, horizontally and vertically, and feel safe in what they're doing? This is a big part of what I'm doing now is how can I bring embodiment into leadership? I think it's a real part that's missing. And the world has shifted.